Hey guys, welcome back to What the Fat. I have one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met in my entire life. Literally someone I've looked up to, met several years ago, but have watched her continue to grow and change so many people's lives, get married to one of the other most incredible people in the world, Josh Field. But today with me on the show, and this week, you'll be hearing from Victoria Field. So Victoria, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
So you're just an incredible human being. I think we've met several years ago, and you were doing work at Quest Nutrition at the time and just absolutely killing it there. I remember talking to everyone around there and they're like, you got to meet this girl. You got to meet this girl. Like, she's crushing it. And like the energy that you have just radiates. So could you tell a little bit who don't know, who you might have known her as Victoria Atalis, now she's Victoria Field. Can you tell a little bit, everyone, who you are, kind of like your background coming up, and then how you got started maybe with Quest first and foremost before we jump into keto?
Yeah, so it's kind of a crazy story. But first of all, thank you for that. I think you are just as amazing and doing so much important work in the form of education around the ketogenic diet, which is so important. But my story sort of starts actually in front of the camera, which is kind of crazy, just how it sort of evolved over time. Obviously, I was really big into fitness, but TV news was my, straight out of college career that I worked for a few NBC affiliates. But even then, as a young teenager, I was in sports and fitness was always like a big thing for me. And while I was on TV news, I was also competing in bodybuilding on the side. And that sort of started to develop as well. And my husband and I opened our own fitness business. I then got my pro card. And it was a really great experience. And obviously TV news had many benefits and really allowed for me to be a one-woman band and learn how to juggle 20 million things at once and then look somewhat decent for camera at the same time, which was crazy. But it was a great experience. But I decided, you know what, I need to do my sort of own thing and branch out and help more people. A lot of my stories when I was on the air had sort of morphed into like the latest health and science research and what was kind of going on in the wellness world. And so I left TV news, which was a really difficult thing for me because that's what I went to school for. That's what I dreamed about. But something bigger was calling me the other way. So then from there, competed in the IFBB, which was a crazy world in and of itself. And, got to travel all over the place, meet incredible people, really push myself to the brink. I think for me, bodybuilding definitely has a perception from the outside in. But it allows for you to like become the best sort of version of yourself through what you do leading up to the stage. So for me, that taught me a lot in the process. But then keto came into my life.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes, I had to stop actually competing because of an injury. And this was right around 2014, maybe, around 2014. And at the time, actually, our dog, she, unfortunately, when she was 1 year old, she suffered a traumatic brain injury from a dog bite. And about a year later, started to develop grand mal seizures, which was horrific to watch. And, at that time, we put her on anticonvulsants. And we had tried a variety of different types of medication. Keppra was the last one that we really tried. And she just became a completely different dog. And her hair fell out. Her skin was turning black. I'll have to share the photo, the before and after photo I have with you.
Yeah, definitely.
But she was suffering from breakthrough seizures even on medication, and she's like this crazy little firecracker, spunky Pomeranian.
So cute.
And I'm pretty sure I could talk about dogs with you for the whole podcast, but I'll try to balance it out. But she was the sweetest, spunkiest little thing. And so this was right around the same time Keto Pet Sanctuary was founded and sort of had started their protocol. And way before really keto was mainstream or anybody really knew how to implement a ketogenic diet outside of, human epilepsy. But we figured, it's being used or has been used with people for this long. Why can't we try it with our dog? And so we did. And today her hair grew back. She was a completely different dog. We got her off all Keppra, all medication. And that really is what led us to down the ketogenic rabbit hole. And we've never looked back.
That's amazing. And so we're going to jump into a little bit tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about the Keto Pet Sanctuary. I mean, incredible work that's being done there. So to me, what's amazing is your journey started from your dog. So a lot of times, like, one of the things we're doing with ketogenic.com is like potentially going the other route where people start as humans and then transfer it to their dogs. But so like you learned about keto because your dog needed it and then implement it into your life. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I came from the bodybuilding world. So I was a carb monster. So there's no like polite way to like put it. I was literally one of those crazy, my metabolism was just insane. And I was upwards of 3,500 calories before a show. A good majority of that was carbohydrates. And so, when I was first it came into my world that, hey, there's this keto diet, not the kind of bodybuilding keto diet that we all,
just chicken and vegetables.
Right, exactly. And it was Ron and Shannon Penna who had, founded Keto Pet at the time. Were like, yeah, you really should try keto. I was like, that's insane. First of all, I don't think I could live without carbs because, that for me was like, that's how I built my physique. That's how I planned my training. That was everything. And my husband and I have always been open and researching and learning and really want to continue to grow. And that's a foundation for us. So, I'm never closed-minded. I'm always down to try something new. And that really was a crazy experience. As soon as I did decide, you know what, I don't think I'm going to compete again. Maybe I give this a try. Maybe it helps me with the inflammation I'm dealing with my injuries, so that was the first step.
So you come from a really interesting perspective of someone who is like me, like a carb monster, and then completely went now become like a fat and protein monster. Now you can, right. But so how was that transition like for you when you first did it? Like the first time I ever did keto, I blew it. Like it was just heavy cream, unsweetened dark chocolate, and I was like addicted to like this keto mousse, and it was the worst thing in the world because I had no idea what I was doing. What was your first experience like when you first started?
Yeah, so coming from that fitness mentality, I was very intense about it because that's how I trained as a pro competitor. Right. I was very intense about it. So I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get all my blood work done before I even get started. I really want to make myself sort of an experiment because there really wasn't a lot of information out there at the time on using this for, training. I think when I met you guys at the first Metabolic Therapeutics Conference, it was like you guys had done work on hypertrophy and I was like, why have I never talked to you before? This is amazing. But for me, it was a very sort of methodical, thought out. I planned out my whole meal plan. I made sure I was, ketogenic ratio. I got the blood testing kit, but at the same time, I was sort of in a bit of a different position because the people that I was, talking to about keto were also opening up this, facility where they were validating a ketogenic diet. So I thankfully had some great, resourceful people on my side as well. But it was funny because I've never, even when I was competing in fitness, have been into taking supplements. Just for me, I love, natural, whole foods has been great. So I thought I could be a superwoman. I'm like, I don't need to take magnesium, potassium, the whole higher sodium thing. Okay, I'm fine. I'll be fine. So I didn't supplement, didn't really pay attention to the whole shift that happens, with electrolytes as your insulin drops. And 3 weeks in, I thought I was completely immune and had bypassed everything. And all of a sudden I started having like these horrible headaches. I'm like, keto is horrible. What is going on? This is terrible. And then I realized quickly, okay, this is an electrolyte imbalance. And then it was fine. But it was really interesting though. I got to see some pretty cool blood markers. And for me, I think it was most interesting because I was a hyper responder, which we now have a name for. But at the time, I just had certain people telling me your heart's going to explode if you continue this diet, essentially because my cholesterol, my particle concentration, my, a variety of different markers were sort of through the roof. Even small LDL was quite high.
Interesting, yeah.
So then I ran through a variety of other tests while tweaking my diet. So I brought, like the crazy bodybuilder mentality sort of kicked in, and I said, okay, well, and at the time I was lucky enough to work with Dr. Peter Attia on some of my blood work, when it comes to lipidology is amazing. And we really took a deep dive on that. And so I can go down a rabbit hole with what we sort of saw, but it was.
So you actually did an NMR to look at like all the different, not just total, because people get wrapped up in like the total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL. So you did total NMR to like look at the details of like VLDL and stuff like that?
Yep. So we did the NMR lipo profile test. We even did a test called LPPLA2, which is sort of vascular specific in terms of inflammation. Obviously, we did a variety of other things, hormones, C-reactive protein, a little bit of everything. My CRP was great. It actually had dropped in half, but my concentration of particles went completely through the roof. My total cholesterol, which it's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, right.
Was like over 350. So to a variety of cardiologists that I went to with this information, they were like, get on the statin, it's no brainer. And I said, no, I really want to figure this out because I do think nutrition plays a role. And at one point I was actually told, pretty sure you have familial hypercholesterolemia. So I literally, being the very rigid, structured person, I said, I'm getting the genetic test. So I got it, didn't have it. And I just tweaked my diet, and my particle concentration was through the roof, and a variety of other, even small particles. And I had a really potentially atherogenic situation, which was interesting. And I think a lot of it has to do with me being a carb monster, and just what sort of happened to my body over the course. Because you train at that level, you get that lean, that affects hormones, everything else. And so once I switched, I think it just took my body some time to find homeostasis. And I tried everything. I mean, we lowered my saturated fat down to between about 20 to 30 grams a day, which if you've ever tried that on a ketogenic diet is really hard because
That is tough.
Even higher mono foods still have saturated fat. So I retested. Then, I specifically targeted foods that, maybe where the saturated fat came from. So MCTs or plant-based MCTs or fats versus animal fats. And so I did a variety of experiments. And at the end of the day, I was like, I just feel good on this diet. I don't want to test my blood anymore.
I'm done with this.
Yeah. And it literally recently, one of my physicians said, why don't we do a total cholesterol panel or NMR lipo? I said, don't, because it's just going to come back high and I feel great. And I never felt better. And she did. And it was actually the best it's ever been.
Wow.
So
I think you bring up a phenomenal point because so many people freak out. They're like, I've done this for 2 months and my cholesterol's high. And I'm like, yeah, well, you've been eating a certain way for 20, 30, 40 years of your life. It's going to take time for your body to adapt. Like you're completely changing the entire metabolic profile of what your body does. Like your entire metabolism changes and shifts. So it takes time. And that's amazing. Like you coming from like literally being at the best of the best for as far as competition, but still your body was adapted to utilizing carbohydrates.
In a big way.
And so it took time for your body to adapt.
Yeah, and people really need to, I think, take a deeper dive. Maybe not as extreme as I did, but understand that there's so many other markers that are important to look at. If your cholesterol is slightly high and the LDL or the bad stuff, which to blanket it as bad, I mean, we all need cholesterol, every single cell in our body. So, when you think about that and then you compare it to, what are your triglycerides? Where's your overall systemic inflammation, CRP? There's some really key factors. And I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV. I'm kidding. But you know what I mean? You really need to take a whole person approach.
That's a great point because literally people get wrapped up in this snapshot and they're like, oh my, like I even have people now that are on keto and they're like, oh, my triglycerides were high. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, they're like, yeah, I had a fat bomb the night before. And I was like, well, that could throw things off. Like anything, like It's just a snapshot. So you need to look at things like A1C in combination with your NMR and all these different things. So phenomenal point. One of the things I want to bring up is you've clearly been in the keto industry for a long time. Like you've seen where it just started out. You were surrounded by incredible people. I mean, great friends of ours with Ron and Shannon, Peter, and you're just surrounded by all these incredible people who were really spearheading a lot of the keto movement and were keto before keto was cool.
Right. Really, we were all shooting in the dark. Like, what are we doing?
What's going on?
We're gonna die. No, I'm kidding.
All right, we're gonna try this out anyway. But so you've seen it grow, and now it's like growing, and you're seeing companies come out left and right, and you're seeing more and more research come out. What are some of the things that you're most excited about? Like after seeing from when you started out to where it is now, like what are some of the things that you're most excited about with the keto movement?
I'm most excited about the fact that there are so many great resources, a big passion of mine. And I think that's why I was in, TV news, why I led a fitness business and all of those things is education and really providing people with accurate information that they can rely on. So seeing all these great resources sort of explode, what you guys are doing, ketogenic.com, all the books and recipes.
Right.
The recipes are amazing.
So many.
Because
So
fat
many.
tastes so good.
Right.
And there's all these awesome people who are actually really taking a lot of the science now and putting it into an application that actually makes sense in the kitchen for people. Right. And so that's really exciting for me to kind of watch. But even more so, a big passion of mine is really jumpstarting the conversation and being a part of the movement and getting this metabolic therapy, which it's not just a weight loss fad. It's something that's been around for 100 years with epilepsy or longer, right? But really allowing for us to build an accurate evidence-based conversation around how it might actually be able to help not just epileptic patients, but cancer, diabetes, ALS, and all of these other things that plague us as a society today, and really start to bring to light the power of nutrition that is completely, in my opinion, underutilized as the medicine that it is.
Phenomenal points. And those are things right along with why I'm excited about this. And you see so many incredible researchers and resources. Like one of the things I heard recently on a podcast, someone was saying, oh, this isn't sustainable. And I was like, if you've seen all these books that just have come out this year alone, like I always look at it and someone's like, oh, I love cookies. I'm like, there's an alternative. Oh, I love brown. I don't want to give up pizza. Great. There's 18 different alternatives. Right. You can do cauliflower. You can do meat crust. There's so many different alternatives. And so I'm excited about that as well. I think those are really great points that you brought up as far as how this industry is growing and continuing to grow beyond just the weight loss component. A lot of times people might come in and say, oh, I just want to lose a couple pounds. They see celebrities doing it because they're losing a couple pounds. But then sometimes you see celebrities like Halle Berry who's like, I'm doing it to help manage type 1 diabetes. Right. Or you have someone come in and they're like utilizing therapies like Dom's doing and Angela's doing with cancer research. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And that's what I think is going to separate this from being like an old Atkins where it like had this boom and it comes back down. I think the research behind it is so strong and in some capacity so new that it's unexplored. So many people are interested in exploring it, and that's where it's going to take off. So that's incredible.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, people are starting to realize I need to be my own advocate. I need to be, when it comes to my health, I have to really do the research and really, partner with physicians who are also open to this and follow the current science because you can't just sort of put your life into somebody else's hands. You really have to know how to navigate a grocery store these days because if you look at what sort of happened to our food supply and the state of, our health as a society, I think people are starting to recognize what we eat, how we sleep, how we stress, all these epigenetic things and daily choices make a massive difference.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And so kind of the counter to that, what are some of the things that you see that kind of scares you about where we're at with keto right now? Like, what are some of the things that you might be like, man, I wish people weren't out talking about this, or I wish we would be careful about this and need to educate on it more because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. Like, what are some things that you see kind of being misrepresented in the keto world?
Yeah, I think one, people really have to be cognizant and cautious of, while it's great that there are a lot of healthy alternatives out on the market, you also have to be very aware that there are some that are unfortunately trying to sort of capitalize on that great buzzword, keto, right now. And there are certain ingredients that may actually have an impact on your blood glucose. And if you're a type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic, you really have to pay attention to those things, and that can be pretty detrimental to somebody's health. And I think more than ever, which is good, food companies are starting to realize people actually are looking at labels, are understanding different fiber sources, and you have to be pretty transparent, but there's still those companies. So I fear sometimes, I just hope, as more companies kind of try to get into this space, especially entrepreneurs, just that they're open, honest, transparent, and authentic with the way, and they're science-based with the way that they go about building their brands. So that's sort of one thing. And two, just making sure that the information that's given to people is accurate because, as you know, like with any sort of like buzzword that's out in the world right now, and this is something you and I have been involved with forever, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I've heard of keto. Yeah, isn't that just Atkins? It's so important to make
Yeah.
sure that you do it right, because if you don't with keto, there's so many people where they'll do it, like you said, for 2 weeks and they're like, oh, it was horrible. It felt like crap and it's not for me. But they really don't truly understand that proper transformation and proper sort of process to get into ketosis.
And then they go tell like 18 other friends, and then there are those people who legitimately could have been helped utilizing this therapy or utilizing this lifestyle. Is like they never get on board because Suzanne, their friend, or Joe, their friend, never said it was the worst thing ever and they felt terrible. So you're spot on. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to do with Ketogenic.com. We're coming up with a certification program because there are so many products. And I think we're just starting to see them. Like every day now I'm seeing like a new bar or powder, potion.
It literally feels like every day.
Every day.
And Ryan has a ridiculous amount of products in his cupboard, which I just went through and I was like, wow, I'm really impressed. Of course, I go to, MrKetogenic.com's house and everything.
And that's one of the things too, is just, I think we're always cautious about what product, if someone sends me something, I'm not going to talk or post about it unless I legitimately have tested it out, believe in it. And I'm like, okay, this is legitimate. There's so many things that people send and I'm like, there's no way I would ever even post that because I don't want someone getting the wrong message that, oh, hey, Ryan posted this, so it's okay to eat, when it's like, that has 20 grams of maltitol in it. I'm going to be running to the bathroom in 2 minutes.
Right, yeah. And then they're going to blame you for disaster
pants.
Yeah, not so good.
So I think so many people are going to really resonate with your story. I think your story is incredible. And you've only just begun on this journey of helping thousands and millions of people really live this lifestyle to the best of their ability. So huge thank you to you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the work you do now. I think it's so amazing. I've learned about it. I've known about it for years, but there are people that I still tell about, and they're like, "There's no way! You're kidding me! There's some place where they're doing this with dogs. This is incredible." So, can you tell us a little bit? Well, first we'll talk about the Keto Pet Sanctuary. Can you tell us a little bit about the Keto Pet Sanctuary? Some of the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, so Keto Pet Sanctuary really started because a gentleman by the name of Ron Penna, who we both know, founded. Yeah, Ron Penna, Shannon Penna, his wife, and Dr. Dominic D'Agostino and Dr. Peter Tia actually had a conversation with Ron quite a few years ago now about fat metabolism and the potential of the ketogenic diet when it comes to human disease and performance. And Ron, sort of being the visionary that he is, said, how do we take this and start validating it right away and really get an honest look at this? Because, while clinical studies and all that are necessary and hugely important in this whole process, it takes some time. And
too long.
Yeah.
Too long.
Takes some time, right? So how can we do this right away? Well, we're big dog lovers. And that's where sort of Keto Pet started. It was a 53-acre ranch that really allowed for us to not only validate the diet, but also to rescue dogs with cancer that were otherwise going to be euthanized. So we really built this place that could be a forever home, but at the same time, we, even though it wasn't a research facility, we still operated with sort of the same scientific rigor as you might find in terms of data collection, because that was hugely important.
Right.
As I've mentioned about my personal blood testing, you can tell we're very rigorous about how we do this. And so we actually had PET CT imaging on site, which for those who don't know is the gold standard when it comes to cancer diagnostics in humans. We also had hyperbaric oxygen chamber treatments, and a lot of really our protocol was based off of the incredible work that Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, Dr. Angela Poff at the University of South Florida, as well as many other scientists in the space. We've talked to you guys along the way. That's really where it was born and inspired. So we would rescue dogs, we would put them on a ketogenic diet, we'd PET scan them day 0, day 60, day 120, and follow their progression, or regression in some cases. We'd give them metabolic conditioning, also known as exercise, a couple times a day, 20 to 30 minutes. Obviously, every dog was different. So being that we weren't a research facility, we rescued every type of breed, every type of cancer. It didn't matter their age. I mean, most of our dogs were anywhere from 4 to 14 years of age. Strangely, even though we weren't a research facility, we had an even split of males to females. Don't know how that happened, it worked out. And so we have a pretty incredible success rate in extending lives beyond prognosis this, Callie being our first graduate, which is a pretty cool story.
Amazing. And you guys have a ton of videos of that stuff online, and I know Callie's story is online as well. And if you guys haven't checked out her story, like, it's absolutely incredible. So let's talk a little bit about like the process. So you'd bring them in, you'd rescue these dogs who otherwise would have been euthanized. Bring them in, and you go, all right, let's spend thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars,
A lot of money.
to put together this facility. And I want to touch on that in a second, but put together this facility, you bring them in, you do a scan on them, and then what was the protocol? So you fed them, was it raw?
Yes, so a raw ketogenic diet, right? So they were all on a therapeutic level of a ketogenic diet. So that being about 82% of calories coming from fat, about, between, depending on the dog and, what we were doing that day, but 1% of calories coming from carbohydrates. So that kind of gives you the big sort of difference. And then protein obviously fills in the rest.
So what was like a typical plate for someone who's like, how the heck do you get 82% and then some protein? What did that look like?
Yeah, so we would feed our dogs. I mean, they got the royal treatment. They would get 80, 20 or 70, 30 ground beef, maybe chicken, turkey, just really depends, coconut oil, heavy cream, butter, all of the things that we love as humans on a ketogenic diet, and then leafy greens, so broccoli, green beans, things along those lines. And it was formulated for each dog, so it would take hours based upon the dog's body condition score, weight, activity level, all of these factors, because it was catered to each dog. And we would blood glucose ketone test them twice a day, 6 times a week. So it was a pretty rigorous, and adjust accordingly, right? So some dogs would be slightly adjusted, but the protocol was on 120 days. So at that point, then we'd reassess, and depending on what sort of where the cancer was and if it was even there or PET negative, hopefully at that point, we would then assess the diet.
Incredible. So they go on a raw ketogenic diet. And so before this, Victoria got to meet Scooter. For those of you, so she met Scooter, and
I tried to bring him on camera in the conversation.
Almost, he's laying over there. But I've been cooking his food, but I think after this conversation, I think I'm going to actually make the switch. I was a little worried about it, but Vic did a great job at explaining like what the benefits of raw are and like why you might want to feed them raw. And I was like, you know what? I was afraid, but I'm going to make the switch. So I will keep you guys posted on how that switch goes.
Good.
So they went raw keto. They exercise, which is obviously a huge component. Did they do hyperbaric oxygen therapy as well?
Yes, most of them, yeah. So it really depended on the case. Often you can use it. It's great for wound healing and things like that. But yeah, they were on a pretty structured plan. And the great thing about dogs is that they can't go down to 7-Eleven and grab a Twinkie when they feel like it. So compliance was great, which, we then sort of evolved, and we've over time started to work with people, which was a very interesting sort of process for us as well. But they would go through, diet, exercise, HBOT, and a variety of sort of, we really tried to make sure that at the end of the day, quality of life was there for them as well, because we're all dog lovers. So we worked very closely with veterinarians, on site, alongside standard of care. I do want to mention that some dogs did go through chemo, radiation. It just really depended on the case, and that was important for us as well. So now, we really have taken that information and focus largely on educating the public with what we've learned. And there's definitely more work that needs to be done, but it's exciting what we found.
And so how many dogs have gone through the program at this point?
A little over 45 to 50. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and we've since then in the education process have expanded out and worked with thousands of pet parents and helping them formulate the diet. So before we had a keto calculator on the website, myself, we have a research scientist, Dr. Shannon Kessel, vet tech, a variety of people who would honestly individually formulate programs for people based on, did their dog have cancer? What was the situation? And that got to sort of a place where we really needed to provide tools that could help us reach more people.
And that's where the calculator just launched, right?
Yes, okay. Yeah, the calculator's live.
So for those of you, some people are watching this, and I didn't understand really until I became a pet parent, like how I'm more focused on like his life and like how he eats, how he exercises, how he's feeling than I am about myself. And it took me to get Scooter to understand that. So I know there are so many people that are listening to this that are like, oh my gosh, how do I find that? So what's the website they go to get to the calculator? They just go to the homepage and they can click on calculator. What's the website?
KetoPetSanctuary.com or ketopet.org. You can go and you'll find Keto Pet Calculator at the top, and then you go on and it'll give you sort of a backstory on the ketogenic diet, our protocol, how we did things, and then you'll see there's a little email entry section at the bottom, which if you put your email in, it'll kick you a ebook. That's the Pet Parent's Guide to the Ketogenic Diet.
Yes, great ebook, by
Which,
the way.
yeah, thank you. It gives you a much sort of widely vast look at our protocol as well as the ketogenic diet for canines, how it's been used previously. And then from there, you gain access to our calculator that's really simple, and it sort of walks you through step by step with few key points. There's different options you can choose. So even if your dog doesn't have cancer or epilepsy, you can still choose a baseline option 1 plan. That's more of a lifestyle approach to the ketogenic diet. What people know of in the human world is maybe a 1-to-1 or about 69-70% of calories coming from fat. And it'll give you a couple of options too. So you can go to the grocery store. If you're one of those people that likes to prepare your food like myself or you or whatnot, you can go and you can pick out the beef or you can pick out the fat source or whatever and weigh it on a food scale. We'll give you the measurements to break it down. Or there's a ketogenic dog food that are partnered with Keto Pet called Valiant Pet Nutrition that you can use that, which is a lifesaver because
and that's a dry food that you can then hydrate, right?
Yeah, it's raw, freeze dried, and frozen.
So get some of that,
it makes it really easy to kind of travel with and things like that. And we control my dog's seizures through a ketogenic diet, and we're always on the go. So sometimes it makes it easier, but it's still raw, which is great.
That's awesome. And I've actually used the calculator. I learned a lot from it. I was feeding Scooter like I was feeding myself. Like I was feeding him way too much. I took him to the vet, and she's like, "He's gained like 2 pounds in a little bit." I'm like, "Oh," I was like, "I'm so sorry." I was like,
I'm so sorry, Scooter.
I was just like feeding him. I was feeding him way too much, but I learned a ton, and so now the next step for me is kind of going this raw route. But
yes,
the incredible work and I just wanted to touch on, and I actually think I talked to the team about this. I want to do a video on this. I think the video of Ron and Shannon and what they did at Quest to not only build Quest, but then the inspiration behind them doing something like Keto Pet, I think is often overlooked. They're the type of people that wouldn't even want people to know that they did something like that because they're just that incredible and humble about it. But I feel like that story needs to be told because they built a massive brand, obviously a massive company. But then, like, you could take that and go do your own. They could just have retired, done whatever. But like, they're more hungry than ever to change more people's lives and animals' lives. And I think that story is incredible. They literally took what they had and built this entire millions and millions of dollars of a pet sanctuary. And it's just incredible what they've done to date and how many pets they've influenced. And now we're starting to see, and I know you're seeing this with the website, is like people are like doing this for their pet, and then they're like, wait a minute, I can do this. Like, why don't I jump on a ketogenic diet? So like, they're changing so many people, what their mission was, what they set out to do. I think they're changing so many more people's lives than they even thought they could from the very get-go. So huge kudos to them, and I know Mo's excited about it. We want to be able to tell that story and like show the amazing work that's being done there. So we'll make that happen.
I just blab about it now because I feel passionate as well to tell sort of the story of what we're doing and what the future looks like too, because we've also got to work with human patients, which is a pretty crazy.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. So that's Epigenix, right? So tell us a little bit about Epigenix because it's phenomenal to see the progressions. Because sometimes people get lost in the research. They're like, oh, like there's work that's being done in rats. Like, cool, I don't care, I'm not a rat. And then you do amazing work in dogs, and you're like, oh my God, we're seeing incredible. And they're like, cool, that's for dogs, but that's not me. And you're like, all right, well, let's take this into the human model and let's really first start breaking through, because some people might be like, why didn't you start there? The steps that it takes to get to that level are ridiculous and likely take 10, 20 years to even approach. But talk a little bit about Epigenix and some of the research that you guys have done.
Yeah, so once Keto Pet was sort of established and we had a good amount of cases sort of under our belt, from there it was like, how do we start working with people? I mean, there are so many people right now dealing with a cancer diagnosis where if nutrition could be a tool to help them in some way, even if it was like, just giving them something they could do day to day, it could be huge, right, if it actually worked. So we created Epigenix Foundation, which is a nonprofit. It's actually the overarching nonprofit of Keto Pet. Keto Pet's the program underneath. And that really allowed for us to partner with a variety of oncologists, physicians, people in the human space that would be maybe comfortable in recommending or referring patients to us that could then be entered into a pilot study. So we had 3 different pilot studies that we've gone through. One with late-stage brain cancer, so glioblastoma, astrocytoma, where a neuro-oncologist from Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, we worked alongside him, a dietitian there, and collected data on all of this group of brain cancer patients, put them on a ketogenic diet. All of our pilot study protocols were about 120 days, much like the dogs, but different because one of the great things was the Quest R&D team at the time could produce keto meals to help with compliance because we knew that that was going to be maybe one of our biggest struggles. Right. So each patient would get coaching. Yours truly would help them in the process, which it certainly was a different sort of experience than obviously I'd worked with athletes. I had a coaching business before. This really provided something and a way to give back in a massive way. And we would test their blood glucose ketone numbers, or they would enter it into our system. I actually would get a notification if somebody would pop out of ketosis. So literally like, hey, Joe, I know you ate a donut.
Get back on it, Joe.
Get back on the keto diet. I can see your numbers. But it was really effective and allowed for us to take a very structured approach with them. And so we had that early or late stage brain cancer patient study. We also had a pilot study with a breast oncologist in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Dr. Elliott. And
I remember watching this one. There was a whole bunch of pictures and keto cake at the end.
Yes. So with that, we worked with a group of early stage breast cancer patients. And what was really amazing about that is we had a group of about 15 women who, they're from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Food there, you're talking shrimp and grits and good carbohydrates, right? So it was a lifestyle sort of process for them. And even though it was focused on cancer, collectively as a group at the end of the 120 days, they lost over 300 pounds.
Wow.
Which is amazing. So it wasn't even a weight loss study, but when we held that celebration that you were talking about, it was like, oh my gosh, is this an episode of like The Biggest Loser? You guys look amazing. And their husbands looked amazing. And then we sort of had an open registry of patients that we would work with. So overall, I've got to work with about 100 cancer patients in the process. And I would say probably the most profound effects that we saw were in the late-stage brain cancer patients. And I'm sure, considering the fact that ketones are very neuroprotective and, offer a variety of neurocognitive issues, positive effects, we saw things like, one patient specifically was suffering from aphasia, alexia, lost his ability to read and write. And then I remember him calling me up 4 to 6 weeks in saying, I just read a few paragraphs in a novel. I've not been able to do this. Like, wow, that kind of stuff for me, it was more than just like, let's use this in combination with standard of care. But if you can provide somebody when they get this diagnosis, their life completely changed. They have a seizure. They then go in for a scan the next day. They find out they have brain cancer, maybe 2 to 3 years to live. You have option, surgery, chemo, radiation. But if you can provide them with, option, another option that's nutrition, right, that might help them feel like they have some control in the situation again, that what that does for a patient's quality of life and the empowerment it provides, that in and of itself, as you're so great with perspective, that changes everything, right?
It's huge. I have chills right now because that's so amazing. And I think I'm sure you could raffle off a ton of stories like that, people that you work with. And it's incredible because so many people get a diagnosis like that. And I know Dr. Adrienne Scheck's doing some work in this area as well. And she's an incredible human being and researcher as well. But there's so many people who get a diagnosis like this. They hear you have X amount of time to live, and oftentimes they lose that perspective, and it's just like it's downhill, and it's downhill fast, right? Because there's no sense of hope for them, and they think it's, like you said, completely beyond their control. And so to be able to provide someone a sense of like, hey, it's just you eat every day anyway. Why don't we just switch some of the foods? Here's some of the research that's been done on those areas. Here's some of the active research that's being done. Why don't we take it? What's the worst case? You're just changing the foods that you eat, right, sort of thing. And that just holds so much weight. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really does. And the neuro-oncologists actually became pretty inspired by the results that we got out of the late-stage brain cancer pilot study. And then, it wasn't a clinical trial what we did, but it certainly inspired now a clinical trial that's going on through Cedars-Sinai that involves the ketogenic diet alongside standard of care, which is huge because it's sort of the first step in getting it into the conversation. And the great part is that they're actually trying to implement it prior to somebody going through chemo radiation. So immediately upon diagnosis, which if you take a look at sort of like how that might improve survival and also the emerging evidence on how it might improve the efficacy of some of these treatments, that could be huge. It's the first step, I think.
Right. And it's a step that needs to happen. And I'm glad that what Epigenix is doing to push that forward, it's not a if this or this, it's in conjunction with the standard of care, which is amazing. But like you said, to progress those treatments forward, maybe there's a point where there's data in animals where you don't need as much radiation or as much chemotherapy, and those are things that are absolutely amazing. If we can start finding new and novel ways. I know Dom's doing research, and Veach actually had done research where you give an exogenous ketone or you fast for a long period of time before chemo, and it sensitizes cells more to chemotherapy. Right. Just work that's being done in that area is profound. So huge thank you for you guys for doing that. That's incredible.
It's exciting to see that it's starting to, clinical trials, things like that are coming sort of out of it. There's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's a step in the right direction.
And I'm excited about it because one of the things we'll talk about tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of this research presented at a conference. And so I always learn from these conferences, and I think not only do I learn talking to people like you who are brilliant out there in the grind doing the work, but at these conferences. So I'm excited to jump into that. But again, for those of you who are interested with the pets, they can go to KetoPetSanctuary.com. And then what about if someone's interested in some of the work that Epigenix has done? Is there anywhere to find that?
Epigeneticsfoundation.org. You can go to that website as well. A lot of the research that we've done is not yet sort of publicized. It's not on the website. But if you go to the Epigenix Foundation YouTube page, you'll actually be able to find previous presentations at the conference that we're going to talk about that will kind of give people an overview of more specifics on what we found. One of which, there's actually a pretty inspiring story on that channel as well, but a surfer that I worked with, a pro surfer, Tim Rita.
I watched this video.
Yeah,
Tears.
He literally lost his ability to surf because of seizures when he got diagnosed with brain tumor. And I actually personally got to see him compete again for the first time going through treatment. He had almost a 50% reduction in tumor size. Granted, he was going through radiation at the same time, but it was an impact that you typically, a neuro-oncologist or a physician might tell you might not normally see. So that video is available on YouTube as well.
Amazing. So I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about this amazing conference that's coming up. And yesterday we talked a little bit about some of the work that Epigenix is doing. We talked about some brain tumors. Actually, a really good friend of mine is going to be at this event as well, who I've had on the podcast before that some people have heard of. But there's a ton of people that are going to be at this event. And it's so inspiring to me going to these events because there's keto conferences, there's academic conferences, and then you watch people on YouTube or Instagram, but there's never truly been a conference that brings them all together and go, cool, let's truly combine the science with the practical application. Because it's one thing to be in the lab, to be able to get data showing, hey, this may have an effect for TBI, or there's some new work being done in cancer, but then there's a whole nother realm to be discussed about people who are actually implementing it and then sharing that with the world. And so can you tell us a little bit about this amazing, the Mhs Conference that's happening January of 2019. Tell us all about it and kind of what inspired you to really get it going.
Yeah, so Metabolic Health Summit is going to be coming to Los Angeles this year, and it was actually founded in 2015. So obviously there was Epigenix Foundation and the work we were doing there, and then there's Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, Dr. Angela Poff at USF, and so we sort of joined forces to really bring to light all of the scientific research that's going on throughout the world, really, because at the time, many of these researchers, clinicians, academics felt like they were working in a silo. And so if you could bring people together in a place where they could present their research in a way, with sort of that scientific rigor and maybe shift people's focus to food being used as a potential tool in science and medicine, I mean, that could be a pretty powerful thing. Not only that, but maybe collaborations can come out of it. And so it started as a scientific, focused solely on as a scientific conference in 2015, and we didn't advertise. It was sort of totally word of mouth, and it was amazing. The first year we had over 250 people there, scientists from around the world, and we said, okay, let's have it again the following year. It almost tripled in size, and really has allowed us to build a platform where people can showcase their work, but at the same time potentially move metabolic therapy forward and allow for it to be a bigger part of the conversation in medicine. So this year, based off of what we had in sort of years past, we decided, okay, it used to be called the Conference on Nutritional Ketosis and Metabolic Therapeutics, which is a tongue twister a little bit.
That's a lot.
So we've rebranded it. It's called Metabolic Health Summit. We're bringing it to Los Angeles because that's sort of like the hub of nutrition science and people caring about, their health. And we're bringing in the top physicians, the top clinicians, dietitians, researchers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs in the space, but also the people, the influencers that have actually taken that science and applied it in their lives. So whether they've had, an autoimmune disorder, and that's why they've implemented a ketogenic diet, or maybe type 1 diabetes, or they just wanted to and needed to lose a significant amount of weight. So it's really sort of our goal is to bridge the education gap. So it's where keto science meets society, and it's 4 days. And it's also going to be, so it's very much a scientific conference. However, it's open to the general public. So we do anticipate having something for everybody, whether you're a physician wanting to learn more. We actually have continuing medical education units available for doctors, to somebody who's just getting started and really doesn't know how to do it, how to do it properly. So we're going to have that accurate information, and then some fun events as well. So a VIP mixer is what we're selling tickets to, where it's on this 3rd floor pool lounge. We're going to have amazing entertainment, keto-friendly appetizers, low-carb wine, dry farm wines. I know you guys know those guys. And it's going to be sort of an experiential, very intimate event for collaborations. And we're selling a very small amount of tickets to that just to keep it intimate. And then a gala dinner that benefits 2 really important nonprofits in the space, Max Love Project and the Charlie Foundation, because our passion is, let's have this event where we can really push the research forward, but let's also give back to the community as well, because these are the people that are doing the important work in the trenches, whether the nonprofits that we work with or, important labs that we believe in. That to us is super important. So it's going to be a sort of ketogenic culinary experience at the dinner. We have some amazing entertainment that we're going to be announcing soon. And it's just going to be a good time, where 50% of tickets from California residents go back to those 2 nonprofits.
Amazing. And it's been an amazing and an honor for me to watch that conference continue to grow. And it's exciting to me. It makes me realize, like I said earlier, was how much this conversation is growing in all the right ways. Because I remember the first year when it was small, it was like a couple rooms here and there, and I still took away a ton. Like I left and I was like, I had like and I was like, dang, okay, cool. Here's some of our research, but here's a ton of other stuff. And then I'm like, it was great. The next year I was like, even more stuff. And now to watch it continue to grow and flourish into what it is, I think it brings together the top minds of the world. And when, like I always talk about this, when you bring like that type of energy into one place, special things happen. So not only will, if people learn a ton from it, and I highly recommend, if there's one conference that you could go to, like out of all next year, like save up and go to this one, because even if you take away a little nugget from this presentation, a little nugget from that presentation, you're literally going to have the researchers and thought leaders across the world who are doing the research. Some of the stuff, like we might even be presenting on stuff that isn't even published yet, which you might not hear about on...
You got to hear these guys talk.
But you might not hear that stuff on... you hear it on the news like 10 years later.
Right.
And they've somehow figured out a way to mess it up. But you won't hear about that, but you get to hear it here. And you're like, wow. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. And I think this provides a platform for highly respected researchers, thought leaders, people who are practically implementing it, to share that experience, share some of the results they're finding in the lab, in life, with people, and go, wow, let's move this conversation forward. Like, we're seeing this happen. Why don't we take the next step? And so the two foundations that you mentioned are just two of those incredible foundations that are every day pushing that envelope forward. And what started maybe as a small concept several years ago, like, hey, let's just bring together some of our favorite speakers and researchers, now has grown into this amazing conversation and this amazing conference that you guys are putting together. And I know the amount of work that goes into that's absolutely insane.
But it's worth it.
But it's worth it. And I just want to say thank you for that, because it's something I learned from. It's something that brings together people that I literally talk to them in email and I'm like, oh my gosh, now I see you in person. Or people that you see on Facebook or Instagram, you're like, oh my God. And it's a great place to bring people together. So huge kudos for you for doing that.
Thank you. And thank you for being a part of it all through the years. And, what's really great as well, and what we've talked about before, is we're actually going to have an expo as well, where we showcase some of the most sort of innovative brands in the nutrition and optimization spaces. But what's really important to us is to really build relationships with businesses, entrepreneurs, small startups that are actually, really cognizant about ingredients and labels, but at the same time, being very inclusive. So our goal is to not tell people like, this is how you do it, that's wrong, this is right, but to allow for us to sort of have a platform and an actual evidence-based conversation around it, and provide people with the tools that are reputable, honest, and that way you can use it as a platform and jump off into the world of ketosis, or maybe even, as a research scientist, you shift your whole lab's perspective on food. So it'll be pretty fun. We have a scientific poster session as well. So in addition to the 30 to 40 speakers that we have, we also have a room essentially where we'll be showcasing science using metabolic therapy and the ketogenic diet from around the world, which will be inspiring.
Sometimes those are the best. You're like this little gem in this poster presentation you see, and you're like, no way. Even though it's not a big presentation, you see it, and there's so much to take away from it. It's like all the best of presentation plus more. It's like the little added benefit.
Right. It's just you leave feeling like inspired, that you leave feeling like, oh my gosh, food really does make a difference in our lives, our health, disease states, and we can do something with this. So that's what excites me the most about it.
So where can people find more information on that? Where can they go to get tickets or find out more on it?
Yeah, so metabolichealthsummit.com is our website, but our goal is to provide education throughout the year in addition to the weekend. So we've actually interviewed Dr. Ryan Lowery on the Metabolic Health Summit Facebook page. So we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, really providing content that's educational. We interview speakers, thought leaders in the space. So that's a fun place to stop by as well until showtime in January 31.
January 31, LA. Definitely don't want to miss it. Now, where can people find you? If they want to find out more, they're like, I love this Victoria girl. She's amazing. And I know a lot of people will come away saying that. Where can they find you? Facebook, Instagram?
So I'm on Facebook, but also on Instagram, and it's Victoria_Field_, I think.
We'll post it in the show notes.
Yeah, post it in the show notes. Gosh, I know there's a couple of underscores that I really didn't want to have to include, but somebody apparently has the name Victoria Field. Let's just be real. So you can find me on Instagram, and I post a lot about what I'm doing. Most of my stuff will be sort of there where I'm sort of speaking on canine nutrition or
all over the world.
Humans. It's pretty fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I just want to say for me, but definitely on behalf of the entire keto community, thank you not only for what you do, but for what Keto Pet Sanctuary, Epigenix, your entire mission with MHS and what you guys are doing there. It's just bringing together a conversation that needs to be had. And so thank you. Trust me, I can't even fathom how much has gone into just this conference alone, but you guys are just putting in your grind and you're figuring it out, and I just can't tell you how much we thank you and appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the work that you guys are doing, because it's so important to get the message out there in the way that you are.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.